Look, I think the big lie of 2024 is the idea that what happened on Thursday night to Joe Biden is an anomaly or an aberration. Who's running the White House today? Who's making decisions today? And I don't really think Joe Biden is up to the task today, let alone 7 months from today.
All right, we're starting to really enjoy the performance of Scott Jennings on CNN. He has walked onto that set. He's the only conservative they allow on the set. There's no one else there. And he is rising to the occasion. And yesterday, it was this morning, excuse me. This morning, he delivered again. Once again, Scott Jennings delivered a truth bomb to CNN, and they don't know how to handle it. Take it away, Scott.
Republicans have to be licking their chops, so to speak, as they're watching this, because they haven't really come out and said anything because they don't have to, right?
Yeah, and Donald Trump, I think, is gone radio silent, which is the best thing he can do. Look, I think the big lie of 2024 is the idea that what happened on Thursday night to Joe Biden is an anomaly or an aberration. There is now credible reporting from Axios, Alex Thompson at Axios, that there's been a 3.5-year cover-up to try to keep Joe Biden away from other people so folks wouldn't see just how bad it is. Last night, the most alarming article I read yesterday was from the New York Times that said his lapses in meetings are getting worse and more frequent. There was a paragraph in that story where senior diplomatic officials in the United States and in Europe said that they weren't sure you could put Joe Biden in the same room as other world leaders right now. Last night, Joe Biden told donors to the Democratic Party that the reason he was bad on Thursday night was because of his foreign travel, a trip that ended 12 days before the debate. What we saw on Thursday night was Joe Biden at his best. 7 days of rest, prep with his top staff. That was Joe Biden at his best. I've honestly stopped worrying about the campaign, and I have one question. Who's running the White House today? Who's making decisions today? I'm not really worried about the presidency in January. I'm worried about it right now. We have serious problems going on right now, and I don't really think Joe Biden is up to the task today, let alone 7 months from today.
Scott, you talked about the concern right now, and I want to just sort of mention what Semaphore is reporting. They're saying, look, Democratic strategist James Carville is saying to donors, look, cut him off. What do you think about that, Maria?
I think it's very concerning. Like I just said, the campaign and the president are at a crossroads right now, and they need to prove to the American people that there will be strength ahead. But I think there's a couple of other things to note, Sarah. I know that right now everyone is breathlessly reporting coming out of the White House because of what's going on. And I think we're missing a really important piece of this, which is Donald Trump. The reporting that Scott is talking about from the New York Times also included some very concerning paragraphs about the slippage in terms of mental acuity of Donald Trump. If we're going to pile on the president, let's also be fair and talk about the mental acuity and the lack of mental fitness that was in the New York Times from Donald Trump in terms of the things that he has said on the stump that make no sense, the incoherencies, the going off on tangents and making no sense, trying to figure out what he's talking about, when he's talking about it, who he's talking about. So let's be fair, right? Both candidates are old, and that is what the American people are facing. Right now, Joe Biden has a lot to prove, but there's no question that whoever ends up being the nominee, and right now it's him until he decides otherwise, we have to wrap around him, the Democratic Party, the Democratic nominee, to make sure that we beat Donald Trump, who is an existential threat to our democracy.
Scott, Maria does make the point that there have been some real rambling rallies that we've heard from Donald Trump. But I do want to ask you about this. When you look at polling and Americans are saying, look, time and again, they don't like their choices for president. Should Republicans actually be worried if Democrats decide to put up a different presidential candidate?
It's an interesting question, and truthfully, I don't know. I mean, I see the merits of both sides of keeping Biden and just trying to ride it out versus going to somebody like Kamala Harris, who, by the way, is also dramatically unpopular. I see no way, by the way, that how the Democrats could skip over Kamala Harris. I mean, if they're going to change candidates here, they have to give it to her. She's not going to step aside. They're not going to go from Joe Biden, skip over Harris, and give it to one of these other people. So it's either Biden or Harris. She's got a approval rating right now that's under 40% as well. However, I would point out one thing. When you look at the swing state polling and the polling where you have Senate races going on, the Democratic senators do much better right now on their ballot test than Joe Biden does. It tells me that the Democrats have a unique Biden problem. And this was before the debate. So there is a world where you could conclude we couldn't do any worse with a fresh face. So why not roll the dice on it? It may be that the riskiest thing the Democrats can do is stick with Joe Biden. But as I said, I'm not really as worried about the campaign right now as I am about the state of who's running the country today. And I don't think we're thinking enough and putting enough focus on the day-to-day operations of our government right now. I know we're all political contributors, but we're all Americans. We're all taxpayers, and we all got to live in the country for 7 months. And we have a president right now that I think, according to very credible reporting, is not up to the job of running it.
Scott.
Yeah, he's exactly correct. And I want to reiterate this because, listen, when you just look at this through a political lens, you want Joe Biden to stay right where he is because Donald Trump will win, 40 out of 50 states or more, right? But this is more than just politics, frankly. That's why it's astounding to me that as you see all of these Democrats make their opinions about what's going on with Joe Biden, it's all shot through one specific lens, November. It's about the election. It's not about actually the functioning of our country, which, by the way, tells me that they've known about this and they know that Joe Biden isn't running things anyway. So there's no change there. It's really just about winning the election. And I want to get into the politics of that in just a second about what we should be rooting for, where we should stand on this. They make a very good point here. It's true. Donald Trump, for the first time in a long time, is actually not getting in the way of his political opponent self-destructing. Oftentimes over the last, 8-9 years, when Donald Trump's political opponent is in trouble, Donald Trump then does something or says something to pile on that actually distracts and takes away and suddenly makes the story about Trump. Trump is on radio silence right now. He's letting this all play out, which is incredibly smart, incredibly disciplined, and frankly, a great change and an incredible improvement for him politically. But make no mistake, unlike what our Democrat friend here on CNN just said, this isn't just, when you turn the focus on Donald Trump, well, he's got problems too. And sure, Biden has problems, but no. There is definitely a story to tell about Donald Trump, but it's not that. The story about Donald Trump is he's not just benefiting from Biden's decline in the polls since the debate. Donald Trump had a great debate, and he's actually benefiting with his numbers going up, as they pointed out this morning on CBS.
Growing pressure on President Biden from inside his own party after last week's very poor debate performance. And we now have a new CBS News poll. While the presumptive nominees are functionally tied in our national poll, it shows a shift towards former President Trump. Now, our last poll had President Biden leading very slightly. The president was also in battleground states in the last poll. Now he is behind by 3 points, though that is still within the margin of error. This comes as the White House offers multiple explanations for the president's debate performance.
You notice how she tries to bend over backwards and say, it's still within the margin of error, don't worry. No, that's a big shift. That's a big shift, again, in a national popular poll, which is, number one, not how we elect a president, and number two, something that Republicans usually don't do so well at. And also, by the way, you noticed significantly that Donald Trump is not just leading in that national poll, not from CBS News, YouGov, but he's hit the 50% mark. That's a big deal. Also, what you didn't see was the number that you should be paying attention to, the 5-man race, not the 2-man race. This is not a 2-man election. This is also a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Jill Stein and Cornel West. That's his name. The Cornel West race. When you do a 5-man race, Trump does even better. State by state, quick look here. Not good. This is a leak, actually, of, we're told, an internal Democrat poll, which usually will skew for the Democrats. Going top to bottom, Colorado, which has been a solid Democrat state for, 6 election cycles, I think, Pre-debate margin, Biden was winning by 3.7%. Now it's 1.9%. Minnesota, pre-debate margin 2.4, now 0.4. Maine, 2.2, now it's dead even. New Mexico, pre-debate, Biden was only winning by 1 point now he's down by 0.5 point. Same in Virginia. And then you start moving into some of these other states that start to become much more solidly red. New Hampshire, which has gone for the Democrats since, I think, 2000, is now at 2.8% in the Trump column. Wisconsin, plus 4.2. The critical district in Nebraska is a 4.3. Michigan, 6.9 for Trump. Pennsylvania, 7. I mean, this is panic time. Panic time for Biden. It's panic time for Democrats. More polling?
You say he does not have the mental fitness. Look at this. 72% say he does not have the mental fitness in order to be president right now. That's up from 65% pre-debate. But compare that to 4 years ago, the percentage of voters who said that Biden was too old. It was just 36%. That's half the level that we're looking at right now. These numbers are not anywhere close to being the same. 4 years ago, voters, for the most part, thought Joe Biden was with it. He could handle the job as president. You look at those numbers now. The fact is, voters do not even see them on the same planet. They don't think Biden's with it. They do not believe he has the mental fitness to be president. And I have to be honest with you. I don't know how he wins with the numbers that we see right now. There is no precedent for the numbers that we're seeing right now for someone running for president, letting alone getting a nomination. These are the types of numbers, when you combine them with some of the numbers that we're seeing post-debate that show him trailing Donald Trump, these are the types of numbers that could end a campaign if he can't turn them around.
True. It can end the campaign if he can't turn them around, except for two critically important questions. Number one, how exactly do you end a campaign when you're in the incumbent president and you're already the presumptive nominee with the convention just 7 weeks away, 6 weeks away? And number two, who's going to replace you? And that leads us to one other set of polls. If Joe Biden isn't the nominee, well, how does Donald Trump do against the other people that they could put in there? Most specifically, Kamala Harris.
We should note, not only does Harris do better in a head-to-head matchup than Biden in the new CNN poll, among women voters, Michael, it's Biden gets 44, Trump gets 47. So Trump wins the women's vote against Biden. Harris in a head-to-head gets 50, Trump gets 43. I mean, that is stark.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not surprised by this. I mean, I've been observing the vice president's schedule for quite some time now, and I think she is at her best, Jake, when she's talking about reproductive rights. I know a lot of Democrats, and I'm saying this as a conservative, well, Kamala Harris can't win. I'm actually not convinced of that, and I'll tell you why. I'm looking at black women. I'm looking at younger black women. I'm looking at white women of color, and I'm looking at their numbers compared to 2018, 2022. They voted overwhelmingly for Democrats because of this particular issue. I think if you have someone who's younger who can articulate that case, and then you got to figure out a way to deal with the economic issues. You got to figure out a way to deal with the immigration issues if you're a Democrat. But her net positives appear to be better than President Biden, and she also has the youth on her side, which the president does not have. So again, I'm not trying to advise Democrats, right, but if I were to consider this, all of the data suggests that the vice president would be a far more formidable candidate than the current president.
Yeah, so Democrats are not just looking at the polls about how Biden does. They're also scrutinizing the polls about how Kamala Harris does, because I think that's their only choice. Legally, logistically, financially, and politically. You just can't bypass her. There's no way. So the only question the Democrats are faced with right now is who does better against Donald Trump, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris? And, well, all indications point to which leads us to the last part of our conversation today, which is, what are we supposed to make of this? We Republicans, we conservatives, we voters who want to change and want to get the Democrats out of the White House, we American patriots who actually want to do what's best for our country. Because again, that's not a topic that you hear anywhere in these conversations, from the media to politicians. They only care about beating Donald Trump. They never actually ask themselves what's in the best interest of our nation. the best thing to get the Democrats out of the White House is for Joe Biden to stay exactly where he is. But that means we have to deal with the next 7 months with a completely debilitated, nonsensical, incompetent president. I know we've been doing that for 3.5 years, but it's even worse now. And if you're our enemy, if you're Russia, if you're China, if you're Iran, if you're Hamas, if you're ISIS, and you see what just happened and what continues to happen, well, you're going to try to take advantage of that. And people are going to die. And we're going to be in much worse shape. So for the country, this guy can't stay president. But for politics, you want him to stay. So what do? Well, listen, it is out of our hands. A small number of Democrat power players are going to make this decision for our entire country because, they're all about democracy. And probably they're going to split the baby here. They're going to let Biden play out his presidency so that he doesn't have to suffer the humiliation of resigning the office. And they'll make Kamala Harris the nominee. And people will think that she is a very strong candidate against Donald Trump. I don't think she is. I think the more she's out, the more people get to know Kamala Harris, the more they hate her. And the fact is, she hasn't really been front and center, not too much. And whenever she is front and center, her polls go down. So if they put her out there, let's have it. Remember, the last time she ran in a Democrat primary, she didn't even make it to Iowa. Democrats hated her that much. So go for it. Make her the nominee. And what do we say as Republicans? What's the best weapon to use against her? I think it's pretty simple. There is one job that Joe Biden entrusted with Kamala Harris during the entire Biden administration. There was one thing that Kamala Harris was charged with that she was responsible for: the Biden border crisis. That's right. The biggest disaster of the Biden presidency was border security and immigration policy. And it was Kamala Harris who was the much celebrated border czar. So yeah, she definitely deserves a promotion. You make her answer for border security every single day of the campaign. Make her own what's happened on our border, because it is universally a disaster and at the same time, universally the most important issue for the American people. I think that's a recipe for success. Even with the media going nuts about the first ever Black woman candidate. Blah, blah, blah. Here's the beautiful thing about them doing this. You know who's going to be really angry and bitter about all of it, and probably will even, at the very least, not do anything to help her, but ultimately maybe even do something to sabotage her? You know who she has to look out for? You know who she has to look over her shoulder for if she becomes the nominee? Hillary Clinton. Don't be surprised if Kamala Harris on her official X account puts out a tweet that says something like, "For the record, I am very happy, mentally stable, and not contemplating ending my life." I'm not saying, I'm just saying.